Now then, let us begin. When we are at the end of the story, we shall know more than we know now. But to begin, once upon a time, there was a wicked sprite. Indeed, he was the most mischievous of all sprites. One day, he was in a very good humor, for he had made a mirror with the power of causing all that was good and beautiful when it was reflected therein to look poor and mean. But that which was good for nothing and looked ugly was shown magnified and increased in ugliness. In this mirror, the most beautiful landscapes looked like boiled spinach, and the best persons were turned into frights, or appeared to stand on their heads. Their faces were so distorted that they were not to be recognized. And if anyone had a mole, you might be sure that it would be magnified and spread over both nose and mouth. "That's glorious fun," said the sprite. If a good thought passed through a man's mind, then a grin was seen in the mirror, and the sprite laughed heartily at his clever discovery. All the little sprites who went to his school, for he kept a sprite school, told each other that a miracle had happened, and that now only, as they thought, it would be possible to see how the world really looked. They ran about with the mirror, and at last there was not a land or a person who was not represented distorted in the mirror. So then they thought they would fly up to the sky and have a joke there. The higher they flew with the mirror, the more terribly it grinned. They could hardly hold it fast. Higher and higher still they flew, nearer and nearer to the stars, when suddenly the mirror shook so terribly with grinning that it flew out of their hands and fell to the earth, where it was dashed in 100,000,000 and more pieces. And now it worked much more evil than before, for some of these pieces were hardly so large as a grain of sand, and they flew about in the wide world, and when they got into people's eyes, there they stayed. And then people saw everything perverted, or only had an eye for that which was evil. This happened because the very smallest bit had the same power which the whole mirror had possessed. Some persons even got a splinter in their heart, and then it made one shudder, for their heart became like a lump of ice. Some of the broken pieces were so large that they were used for window panes, through which one could not see one's friends. Other pieces were put in spectacles, and that was a sad affair when people put on their glasses to see well and rightly. Then the wicked sprite laughed till he almost choked, for all this tickled his fancy. In the heart of the bustling city, there was a little bakery named Sweet Delights, owned by an elderly woman named Martha. Martha was known for her charming personality and her divine pastries that had captivated the taste buds of every customer who stepped through her doors. She had a special recipe for cinnamon rolls that she guarded fiercely. Every morning, the aroma of freshly baked goods would waft through the streets, drawing in a crowd of early risers. One of those early risers was a young man named Daniel. Daniel was a talented artist who had hit a roadblock in his career. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't seem to get his big break. Every morning, he would sit by the window in Sweet Delights, sketching in his notebook and savoring Martha's pastries. One morning, as Daniel was lost in his thoughts, he noticed a small girl standing outside the bakery, peering in with longing eyes. Her clothes were tattered, and her face was smeared with dirt. Martha noticed her too and beckoned her in with a warm smile. Without hesitation, she handed the girl a cinnamon roll and a cup of warm milk. The girl's eyes lit up with gratitude, and she devoured the treat hungrily. Daniel felt a pang of inspiration watching this simple act of kindness. He decided to sketch the scene unfolding before him. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel continued to visit the bakery, capturing countless moments of everyday magic on his canvas. One day, he showed Martha his sketches. Her eyes widened with delight as she flipped through the pages. Daniel had managed to capture the soul of the bakery and the comforting ambience that Martha had created. She suggested he host an exhibition right there in the bakery. With Martha's encouragement, Daniel's exhibition became a reality. The little bakery transformed into a gallery, with Daniel's art adorning the walls. The night of the exhibition, the bakery was filled to the brim with people, all admiring Daniel's work. As word spread, Daniel's art began to gain recognition, and his career took off. Through it all, he never forgot the simple act of kindness that had sparked his inspiration. Sweet Delights continued to thrive, with Martha's pastries bringing joy to everyone who tasted them. And every morning, without fail, Daniel would visit the bakery, sharing a smile and a few kind words with the owner who had changed his life for the better. In the heart of bustling Beirut, there stood a small apartment. Inside, the scent of jasmine wafted through the open windows, mingling with the city's cacophony. Amal was a young woman whose life revolved around her love for music. She would often hum songs by the iconic singer Fairuz, whose voice had a magical way of soothing her soul. Amal was pregnant, and her baby was due to arrive any day. Each night, she would sit by the window and sing Fairuz's lullabies to her unborn child, believing that the baby could hear and recognize the melodies. Her husband, Youssef, shared her love for music. He played the oud, and together, they dreamed of a future filled with serenades and musical moments. One evening, as the city lights flickered, Amal felt the first signs of labor. Their apartment, once filled with music and comfort, now transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Youssef helped her to the hospital, his heart racing with excitement and nerves. Hours stretched into what felt like an eternity, and finally, the cries of a newborn filled the room. Amal and Youssef held their baby girl, her eyes wide and curious, absorbing the new world around her. They decided to name her Fairuz, in honor of the singer who had been a constant source of comfort and joy in their lives. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, little Fairuz showed an extraordinary connection to music. Her cries would cease when Amal sang, and she would coo and gurgle when Youssef played the oud. It was as if Fairuz had inherited her parents' love for melodies. One night, as the family sat together in their cozy living room, Amal began to sing their favorite Fairuz song. To their amazement, baby Fairuz attempted to mimic the tune with innocent babbling. Tears filled Amal's eyes as she realized that their love for music had created a new bond, a musical thread weaving through generations. In the years that followed, Amal and Youssef nurtured their daughter's innate musical talent. They filled their home with instruments and melodies, and the sound of little Fairuz's laughter mixed with the tunes that defined their lives. The city of Beirut continued to bustle around them, but inside their apartment, there was a harmony that transcended the chaos. Fairuz, the baby named after a legend, grew up to have a voice that carried the same enchanting quality. She became a beacon of hope and joy, much like the singer she was named after. And so, the legacy of Fairuz lived on, not just in the songs that filled the airwaves of Beirut, but in the heart and voice of a little girl who embodied the music that had always been a part of her. In a quiet village nestled between rolling hills, life was simple and predictable. Everyone knew everyone else, and the days flowed like the gentle river nearby. In this serene setting, something extraordinary occurred that would forever change the course of the village's history. One brisk morning, as the sun began to glimmer through the morning fog, a strange sound echoed through the village, a soft, melodic hum that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Startled, the villagers gathered in the town square, eyes scanning the skies. It was then they saw her, a baby no older than a year, floating effortlessly above the ground, her tiny body encased in a golden aura. The baby's name was Lila, and she had an infectious giggle that filled the air with joy. Her parents, Amelia and Thomas, were as bewildered as the rest, having no explanation for their child's newfound ability. Lila's floating quickly became the talk of the village. People traveled from neighboring towns to catch a glimpse of the Under the vast expanse of the night sky, in a village hidden deep within an ancient forest, lived a young girl named Elara. Orphaned at a tender age, Elara found solace in the company of nature. She had an extraordinary gift. She could communicate with animals. Yet, despite her talent, loneliness often plagued her heart. One fateful evening, as the moon shone with a mystic glow, Elara heard a faint cry. Following the sound, she stumbled upon a wounded wolf cub trapped in a hunter's snare. With gentle hands and a compassionate heart, she freed the cub and nurtured it back to health. This wolf, whom she named Kuro, became her closest companion. Kuro possessed striking emerald eyes and a coat as black as night. With time, the bond between them grew unbreakable. They roamed the woods together, discovering hidden trails and sharing countless adventures. Elara often felt that Kuro understood her thoughts better than any human ever could. One dusk, as the forest echoed with the songs of twilight, a calamity struck the village. A band of marauders descended, bringing chaos and fear. Homes were set ablaze, and the villagers were in peril. Elara, with Kuro by her side, knew she had to act. Guided by Kuro's keen instincts, they devised a plan. Elara sneaked into the heart of the village where the marauders' leader resided. Using her ability to communicate, she enlisted the aid of the forest animals. Deer, squirrels, and even birds joined the effort, creating diversions and confusion. Kuro, with his agility and strength, navigated through the chaos to retrieve the stolen goods while Elara led the villagers to safety. In a final confrontation, Kuro faced the marauders' leader. It was a fierce battle, one of raw strength and cunning. Just when it seemed all would be lost, Elara arrived and, with a single whistle, summoned every animal in the vicinity. The combined force of the forest inhabitants overwhelmed the marauders. With the village saved and peace restored, the villagers hailed Elara and Kuro as heroes. Elara, however, remained humble, knowing that it was the strength of unity that had triumphed. From that day on, the village and its surrounding forest thrived in harmony, symbolizing a bond deeper than any that words could describe. Elara and Kuro continued their adventures, but always knew they had a home where they were loved and respected.